Friday the 13th is a horror film series that goes back to Sean S. Cunningham's same-named 1980 slasher classic. More on Cunningham in the Deep Star 6 retrospective. For Freddy vs. Jason and Friday the 13th Part 1 to 8, see the same-named retrospectives.
Walk down this road when the road gets rough.
1993, Jason goes in Adam Marcus' same-named directorial debut to hell. In the final Friday, Jason is successfully killed by the FBI. However, he manages to survive by possessing people or something like that. There's only one person who knows, bounty hunter Creighton Duke, who the so-called script aka infantile fanfiction by the so-called director who co-wrote the story pulls right out of its ass, and who is supposed to be foisted on us the whole time as the great Jason expert, aka arch enemy, as if Tommy Jarvis had never existed, since he's still alive, but wasn't allowed to appear because New Line didn't own the rights to Tommy or the Friday the 13th title at the time, which is why the movie is called Jason Whatsoever, as those were still lying around at Paramount. The Duke of Crystal Lake, the Duke of New York, was obviously busy, aka Prison Explanator 5000. He spends over an hour there, tells our protagonist Steven, and breaks for the information for no reason at all some of his fingers, that Jason can now put himself into anybody by entering his victim's mouth as a worm. Oh, so he has also seen Jack Shoulder's modern sci-fi horror classic The Hidden from 1987. However, he can only get his own body back to be seen in the mirror if he occupies a family member. At least that's what it said in a fortune cookie on the subject. And according to this week's horoscope, he can only be killed by a family member with a special magical object. The Kandarian dagger from Evil Dead 2? Probably read in the Necronomicon Ex Mortis, which is also lying around there. Furthermore, it was clear from the last reading of the tea leaves that the only people who come into question for this are his alleged sister and her daughter, who herself has a little baby girl from Steven/her ex, and who are also sneaking around. Oops, not anymore. So just the daughter and the child.
Don't know what's wrong. I do know what's right.
Jason and the franchise Goes to Hell is so bad they even misspelled Voorhees' name on his house that not even the most hardcore Friday the 13th cultist can defend it with a straight face, and is an even more shameless cheat than its predecessor, Part 8, Jason Takes a Boat. At least in that one he was still in it. Here you only see him in the first and last few minutes, and occasionally for a second in the mirror, as long as he doesn't get bitten by a vampire, I guess. The Abomination got stacked through the heart by critics and is quite rightly in the last place with the audience, with me not even on the list. And at costs of $3 million, it only made $16 million in the US, so slightly more than its least profitable predecessor. Shortly before the end of filming, Marcus was due to a dispute replaced by Cunningham, who finished the thing himself with a lot of reshoots because he was dissatisfied with the original cut. What? Was it even worse? How the hell is that possible? In the final, Jason uses his sister's dead body to be reborn. It's been lying around in the cellar for some time, and he could have been doing this undisturbed for hours instead of chasing his niece, which stabs him with a bullshit dagger, and he gets dragged with his mask into purgatory. In other words, the place where the unsuspecting viewer, who mistakenly thought he was watching a Friday the 13th movie, has been since 90 minutes. In the cheapest scene ever, the mask reappears and Freddy's arm grabs it, laughing at the audience. Even Jason Voorhees was so embarrassed from the last movie that he distanced himself from it to such an extent with new identity as Jason X. Not only left his city or the country, but directly with the first available flight the entire planet. In 2001, Jason X has his own personal space odyssey in the same named horror action science fiction. The movie, which doesn't take itself too seriously, begins in the distant future of 2008. Before Jason is cryogenically frozen on a secret military base, he kills all the personnel and ruptures the tank so that the badly wounded scientist in charge also freezes. "455 years later, Earth has become uninhabitable and humanity has moved to other planets, including one called Earth 2. A scientific team from there, studying the old Earth, finds the two bodies and takes them to their spaceship. The corrupt head of research wants to take Jason to the space station Solaris to sell him for a profit. And while the defrosted scientist tries to warn the crew about him, the defrosted Jason naturally starts murdering everyone on board. Jace of Space had the worst luck of any installment upon release and suffered from the loss of its biggest supporter, the production manager who resigned, which meant that the already in 2000 completed movie sat on the shelf for 2 years due to lack of support, before finally being released in the US in 2002. At that time, it had already some releases partially the previous year in some territories like in Spain. Here in Germany, it was shown in 2001 at a festival. The, in my opinion, very entertainingly staged parody received completely undeserved the usual over-the-top bad reviews and couldn't even make its $14 million budget in the US back. Director James Isaac, see also House 3, began his film career as special effects expert. In addition to movies such as Return of the Jedi, Gremlins and Deep Star 6, he also worked on several projects by horror legend David Cronenberg, such as The Fly, which explains his cameo in the opening. I found Jason X, especially as a sci-fi fan, very good, despite the many computer effects. For the time, the spectacle, more expensive than the last 4 movies together, was unusually elaborately staged. The story is mainly based on Aliens/Aliens and Star Trek TNG. The team of scientists also includes an android, there's a holodeck on the ship, a troop of soldiers is roughed up in the hunt for Jason, and so on. Even if some of the scenes seem after 25 years thanks to the rustic CGI a bit silly, it also has a lot of practical effects that still hold up. I consider it less as a part of the series and more like a cool Outer Limits episode that I still enjoy watching from time to time. In the final, Jason is revived after a deceptive victory by nanotechnology as Uber Jason. However, he can be blown into space by the last survivors and finally burns up when he enters the atmosphere of the second Earth, while his mask falls to the bottom of a lake. In 2009 came under Paramount and New Line Cinema a remake/reboot fudged together of the first 4 parts of the original series by Michael Bay's infamous franchise demolition company Platinum Dunes. See also, among others, the Amityville rehash from 2005 or the horrible Nightmare Abomination from 2010. After witnessing as a child his mother beheaded in self-defense, as in part 1 by the last victim of her murder spree, who claims until the end that he drowned, although we can see he is still alive creeping around in the bushes watching it all, he now follows as an adult in her murderous footsteps, with a bag over his head as in part 2. kills a group of teenage campers at Crystal Lake, and kidnaps Whitney, who kind of resembles his young mother, probably also inspired by the final of part 2. 6 weeks later, we follow her brother, similar to Rob's sister murderer search from part 4, on the time-consuming but eventually successful search for her. At the same time, after he finds his mask as in part 3, another group of teenagers in a vacation cabin get a visit by Jason. Friday the 13th wannabe by simple-minded rehash expert Markus Nispel, who was already responsible for the unnecessary polished up for the mainstream Chainsaw Massacre, Frankenstein and Pathfinder infusions, and later also took a dump on Conan in 2011, rightly received negative feedback across the board, but still made back more than 3 times its $19 million budget alone in the US. There is also a 10-minute longer rip-off cut, of course killer cut, in which, in addition to some extended violence and erotic scenes or alternative takes, hostage Whitney can escape from Jason's catacombs, but is later recaptured by him anyway, which I also don't give a fuck about. In the unimaginative by-the-numbers slasher product, the brother and sister can apparently kill Jason in the final and throw him into the lake, but he reappears ready to attack and the ending remains open. Other Friday the 13th projects are currently, as of 2024, apparently failing due to a tricky situation with the rights. Since a court ruling, Cunningham, who at some point announced a movie for some point, probably shares the rights with original screenwriter Victor Miller, who at some point announced a TV series for some point.